Hey, this is Optimus KevTron. Wanted to do a stream to talk about my story and how I got through addiction, depression, and everything and ended up in HEX where I am now. And it all started back in 2007 when I was prescribed benzos like Xanax, ADD, or medicine for ADD that was like Ritalin at the time. And I can't remember what antidepressants they were, but they put me through a bunch of them because none of them really worked. And so that was at 17 years old. I was, already taking all that medication that I guess I already had an addictive personality at that point, so it just added to it. And then when I was 18 or 19, one of my friends introduced me to hydrocodone that I'd take, and then I fell in love with that, the feeling that hydrocodone gave me. Because other things like alcohol, I never really cared for. I never liked smoking weed either, but apparently I liked the stuff that altered my body more than my mind, like painkillers and benzos for anxiety. And yeah, so I started taking those, the hydrocodone along with Xanax and Klonopin and Adderall and Ritalin. And then, I had to go to the harder stuff, which was really strong painkillers like OxyContin and Dilaudid or hydromorphone, Opana. And once those weren't enough and way too expensive, I started injecting them and, started going through them even faster at that point. So then there's one day when I was, I think, in my mid-20s, that one of my friends texted me. And he was a friend that also suffered from addiction and is now doing really well. But he texted me asking if I wanted to try some H, and I had no idea what that was. And he told me it was heroin, so I was like, all right. He said if I have $10, he'll give me a shot. So I tried it and fell in love with that. And then over the next few years, just kept doing it, taking as much as I can, whenever I can, just constantly high. And, I still drank a lot, even though I didn't like getting drunk. It was just to drink to get drunk. And then around my mid-20s, I found a cocaine dealer and really went into cocaine hard. And I was living with an ex-girlfriend at the time, or girlfriend at the time, now ex-girlfriend. And I started stealing from her, and I was just so ashamed of myself. I moved out and haven't really talked to her since. I sent her a check for, double the amount of money that I owed her because I just felt so horrible, but I knew that relationship was done. But yeah, stole a bunch of money from her to buy even more cocaine because I was going through, at least 1 gram a day, and started injecting it along with heroin and taking the benzos and everything else. And then when I was around 26 years old, my parents sent me to this psychiatrist that worked with people who had substance abuse problems. And I injected some cocaine before I went to go see him. And since he was a former cocaine addict, he could tell really easily that I was on something. So he decided to send me to rehab a few states away. And, I agreed to do that because it was that thing that you hear a bunch of addicts say that they're sick and tired of being sick and tired. I was at that point. I was just so done with it, but my body needed it, needed the drugs. So I went to rehab for 43 days, did really well, was completely sober those 43 days. And it only lasted a couple weeks after I got back home. And, I was prescribed Suboxone at that point. And that's a really good drug to help addicts with getting off of heroin and other opiates, because it actually blocks the opiate receptors in your brain. So you can still get past it, but it will send you into withdrawals. And use that for a couple years. And I started injecting it too, which, you're obviously not supposed to do, but I did because it, made it a little bit stronger. For, I don't know if it was just psychological reasons or if it actually did make it stronger. But, I'd later find out that I actually had something like an addiction to using a needle. People would call it needle fever and stuff, where even if you injected just water, it made you feel better just because you wanted to use the needle. You associate it with feeling good. But, yeah, I went through years of using Suboxone along with Xanax. A couple years ago, I was prescribed, I think, 90 bars of Xanax a month that I go through in 2 weeks. So, what is that? That's 180 milligrams of Xanax. That's a crazy amount. Some people take more, but most people take a lot smaller amounts. And, combine those, went off and on of cocaine, injecting that when I could afford some. And, luckily I was done with heroin, but, using all the other stuff that didn't really matter. And then in 2020, I started not really using as much. So I was just using Suboxone, not really injecting as much, and just using Xanax sort of as prescribed as much as possible. But, I thought I was doing better, but I was still, looking back now, I was still heavily addicted to drugs. And, finally then 2021, I was still using cocaine and everything, and then one day at work, because we had to take our temperature for COVID, it showed up that I had over 103 temperature. So they sent me home, told me to go get a COVID test. I went there, it came up negative. I went and got another one. It was negative, but I was showing all the symptoms of someone who has it. So then, 2 weeks later, at this point I was bedridden. I couldn't move. I could barely breathe. I thought I had COVID. I was like, man, this is, awful. I can't believe people, actually live through this, because, I felt like I was dying, and I actually was dying. And I went and saw one of my friends. It was the last time I bought any drugs. I went to go buy some Xanax from her. And I went over there, and first thing she said when she saw me was like, oh my God, you look like you're about to die. I was like, yeah, I don't feel too good. And, seeing pictures later of what I looked like when I was first in the hospital, I look like death. But she sold me some Xanax and some Adderall, and I took that, and I think I was laying on my bed for about an hour waiting for the drugs to kick in. I was breathing really heavy. I just couldn't catch a breath, and my whole body just hurt. And I was thinking, this will at least give me some relief from how horrible what I thought was COVID was. And I woke up 2 days later, and I was in the hospital, in the ICU. And my parents said they found me unconscious on my bed, and they came over and found me because I wasn't responding. And took me to the emergency room. They said I was, talking to him at that point, but I don't remember anything. But they took me to the hospital. They would tell me later that the nurses and doctors that came out to talk to them while I was in the ER were already talking to them, sort of, bracing themselves that I'm not going to live. I guess a nurse came over and sat down with my mom and said, he's not doing well. And my dad was, I guess, in denial, saying, he'll be fine. And, they're trying to tell him just like, no, he's not going to live. And yeah, I guess it was like that. I talked to a doctor a few weeks after my surgery, and he said that at that point, he said they were just discussing how to let me die in the most comfort possible, what to give me, letting my family, and I guess they let my family, and they're ready for me to die any second at that point. But then all of a sudden they said my health just turned suddenly with the antibiotics they gave me. That all of a sudden everything started getting better. So I thought, okay, now we can admit him to the hospital, and we won't do surgery yet, but we'll see if, how well he does over the coming week, and maybe we can get him into surgery. But they said, the chances of me living through the surgery were not good at all, so they weren't preparing for that. So I was in the ICU for about 10 days before they finally said, you're definitely good enough to have open heart surgery. So I went there and did the surgery. They had to poke 7 holes along my chest. I can show you. So that's the big scar. And then I have, you can't really see them as much, but holes going throughout my chest up to the sides to drain all the fluid from my lungs. And I guess it took them like 4 tries to knock me out for the surgery. Apparently, I don't really remember it too much, but they said later that they would inject me with fentanyl. And I kept asking, have you injected me yet? And he's like, yeah, we've already done it 3 times. We'll do it again. And just be like, did you guys do it yet? Because I was still awake. I was still conscious. And I guess finally they got me, but I didn't stay awake or asleep for long. So, I woke up after the surgery, but when I still had the tube and everything, the respirator, down my throat. So they said they're really surprised at how hard it was to knock me out. But yeah, then I recovered, and, instantly when I woke back up, I wasn't able to eat before I went into surgery. Any of the days before I was at the hospital, and the 10 days I was there before the surgery, I just couldn't eat anything. They sort of had to force me to eat. But then right when I woke up from the surgery, I immediately asked for food. I was just so hungry. I felt amazing. And, I stayed in the hospital there for a few more days until I had my parents bring my phone to me. And while I was there, I had already invested in Dogecoin. A few months ago, I bought it, 3 cents. And at that point, I saw that it had gone up in price. So I was pretty excited about that. I invested in AMC and GameStop stock. And I bought AMC at, just a couple dollars. And, now it was worth, I ended up selling it around high 60s. But, yeah, when I was there in the hospital, I think at that point I was looking at investing in the Shiba Inu. So I was looking on Reddit, and I was on multiple crypto subreddits, and I saw this guy had posted a picture of what was, what turned out to be Staker app. And he said, I can't believe after a $2,000 investment, it's now worth this much, or something like that. And it was worth $1.84 million. And I just thought that was insane. Everyone else, was saying, oh, that's not possible and stuff. I was like, oh, this is probably legit. I want to see, what this is. And they told me it was HEX, and, I started looking into HEX. And then I saw something on the Shiba Inu subreddit where some guy, it was either on that or it was on that comment section of the guy who posted Staker app. And I remember I asked him or someone else, I said, how do you find these projects to get into so early? And he responded saying, all you need to know is HEX and Richard Hart. That's it. So even though he got downvoted a bunch and everyone told him, I'm sure it was full of scam and downvotes and stuff, I was like, all right, I'll check it out. I'll check Richard Hart out. And, I invested in HEX. Now that first investment has gone up. What that'd be? Now it'd probably be like a 4x, but at the all-time high, it was over a 10x. Because I think that was like 5 cents, 6 cents that I bought in. And I think that was like late May, early June. I can't remember what the price was then. But yeah, just the more I started watching, like I found Gerardo and started watching a ton of his videos, found Hodl Dog, watched a bunch of his because I wanted to learn how to stake. I hadn't even staked yet after like a month of being invested in HEX because I was still learning everything. So yeah, did that and just kept buying as much as possible and eventually swapped everything I had for HEX, sold all my stocks for HEX and to sacrifice for Pulse, and yeah, gone all in. And, now I'm where I am now, and very happy that I went the way I did. And I'll be sacrificing for Pulse Swap or whatever it's called when the sacrifice phase comes out. But yeah, I've always thought, what would happen if all my drug abuse didn't lead to where I am now? Would I be in HEX? Would I be in Pulse? Because if it wasn't for being in the hospital, I wouldn't have had all that free time to research. I wouldn't have come across that subreddit where that guy told me about HEX. And so yeah, I think it's, everything happens for a reason, and it's, it happened the way it did, even though I had to go through a lot of bad stuff for like 12 or 13 years. Since I've been in HEX, it's been amazing. I've been working out a bunch. I've, gotten rid of all the bad relationships I've had and found really good ones, healthy ones. Been working really hard, doing really well at work. And, I haven't called in a single day. I've been, 20 minutes early every day. I've stayed afterwards. I have tons of overtime I'm doing, just, working really hard. And my family and friends, they're very thankful just how all of a sudden I changed. After getting the surgery, realizing how close I was to death, or that I did actually die for a little bit, sort of started my chapter 2 of my life. And it's just, I haven't felt any depression in the time since the surgery, and haven't been tempted to use any drugs. And of course the doctors had told me if you try and inject anything again, it'll most likely kill you, because they just cleaned up all the bacteria that was in my heart from injecting for years. It just built up in one of the valves, and if I were to try anything, it would build up pretty quick again, and that would be it. I probably won't survive a second time. But, I don't even have any desire to use any drugs. I do have some, like, shakiness from tremors, but I use Kratom for that. I've seen other guys talk about Kratom in the HEX community. And, it doesn't really get you high. It just works. It really helps with sort of anxiety and other stuff. I just take, a little bit when I need it. And, other than that, maybe, drinking coffee would be the closest thing to a drug that I use. I've drank a few times, but it'll just be like, one drink when going out on a date or something. So yeah, it's been amazing. I just want to thank Richard Hart for creating HEX, whoever that guy was that, told me to look up HEX, and Richard Hart and everyone else in the community. It's been incredible. And, just very grateful for everything that everyone has done. So, I'll probably be making more streams after this, and I'm really excited to start streaming and doing more for the community. So, thank you very much.